My name's Alex, I'm 26, and until recently, I would have told you my family was complicated, but still my family. You know the kind, lots of noise, lots of opinions, but mostly well-meaning. Or at least, that's what I used to think. This story is about the moment I stopped making excuses for them, and the revenge I didn't plan, but absolutely don't regret. It started on a Tuesday. My birthday was coming up at the end of the week, and I hadn't planned anything big. Honestly, I wasn't in the mood. I'd been laid off 2 months prior, still job hunting, and the weight of trying to pretend everything was fine was starting to wear me down. I live alone in a tiny apartment just outside the city, and while I've never been the center of attention type, birthdays always made me feel like I had to fake it more than usual. Smile. Pretend I was grateful for cheap cards with not-so-subtle digs about finding direction. Nod along as someone, usually my mom or my sister Ashley, made a comment about how maybe this will be the year Alex finally figures it out. Still, when my cousin Jenna texted me Friday morning saying the family had made dinner plans just for me, I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be different this time. Jenna was one of the few people in my family I actually liked. She'd moved out young, worked her way through school, and didn't care about all the passive-aggressive dynamics that brewed between everyone else. So I figured, okay, I'll show up, eat a meal, play nice, and maybe duck out early if it starts to feel like one of those nights. I dressed decent but not too flashy, black jeans, a button-up, clean boots, and drove across town to the restaurant. It was one of those big Italian places with fake vines on the walls and Sinatra playing just loud enough to drown out small talk. When I walked in, I saw my entire family already seated at a long table, mom and dad at one end, Ashley sitting next to them, scrolling on her phone. My Uncle Dan, more on him later, sat near the middle, loudly telling some story about a guy at work who got fired for too many feelings. Classic Dan. I took the only open seat, next to Jenna, who gave me a small smile and a quick, happy birthday. She looked uncomfortable. That should have been my first clue. The dinner started okay. Some awkward toasts, a few polite laughs. My mom complimented my shirt in that way she always does. Oh, that's nice. You finally found something that fits you right. Ashley kept throwing glances at her phone, like she was waiting for something. Or someone. I tried not to read into it. When the food came, conversation turned toward what everyone was doing lately. Jenna had gotten a promotion. Everyone clapped. My younger cousin Tyler was going to college. Big applause. Then Mom turned to me and asked, "So, any luck with interviews?" I gave a non-committal shrug, trying to keep it light. Still looking. Sent out a few this week. Had a phone screen yesterday. "Maybe you're being too picky," she said, already chewing her lasagna. "A job's a job. At your age, you can't really afford to wait for the perfect one." Ashley snorted into her glass. Dad cleared his throat, but didn't say anything. I felt my cheeks flush. I wasn't looking for a perfect job. I was trying to find something that wouldn't crush my soul 5 days a week. Uncle Dan chimed in. "You know, when I was your age, I worked double shifts and didn't complain. There's no shame in hard work, Alex." He always said my name like it tasted sour. "You're not above it." "I never said I was," I muttered. Ashley leaned over with that syrupy voice she uses when she wants to sound sweet but means the opposite. "We just want you to stop floundering. It's hard to watch." Jenna gave my knee a quick squeeze under the table. I forced a smile. "Thanks for the support, guys." It was then that the waiter came out with the cake. A big sheet cake with white frosting, blue piping, and a single candle. Everyone started singing. I was trying to let it be a moment. Just a simple birthday song. Nothing dramatic. I blew out the candle. Then I saw the writing on the cake. Oops, still a disappointment. It wasn't even subtle. My name wasn't on it. Just those 5 words. In pink icing. For a second, I genuinely thought I misread it. I blinked, stared, then looked up. Everyone was laughing. Ashley practically choked on her drink. "It was just a joke," she said, between giggles. "Come on, don't be so sensitive." Uncle Dan slapped the table. "Best cake ever." "You gotta admit, that's funny." I didn't say anything. I just stared at it. My own birthday cake. A punchline. I looked at Mom. She had that tight little smile she gets when she thinks someone is overreacting. "It's meant to be lighthearted, honey. We all love you. It's just humor. Love. Right?" I stood up slowly, picked up my bag, and looped it over my shoulder. Jenna looked up at me. "Alex," she whispered, "don't let them get to you." "I'm good," I said, calmly. Then I leaned down, just slightly, and whispered something into Uncle Dan's ear. Just one sentence. His face dropped instantly, like I'd poured ice water down his spine. I walked out. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. That night, I turned my phone off. Spent the weekend ignoring it. It was quiet for 2 weeks. Blissfully quiet. Then, suddenly a ringing. Notifications. Emails. Texts. Missed calls from Mom, Ashley, even Dad. All of them in a frenzy. Begging me to call back. Saying there's been a huge misunderstanding. That I went too far. That I need to fix this. You see, what I whispered to Uncle Dan was nothing dramatic. I just reminded him of something. A little secret. One I wasn't supposed to know. The thing about secrets is they rot. You can bury them under fake smiles and polite dinners and decades of, we don't talk about that. But they're still there, festering. And when the rot finally surfaces, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door in. What I whispered to Uncle Dan that night was simple. I know about the money. That's all it took. I saw his face change instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. 1 second, he was riding high on the sound of his own laughter. The next, he was pale, stiff, like I'd mentioned a name he thought was buried in concrete. Here's what they didn't know. 6 months ago, I was over at my parents' house helping them clean out the attic. Dad had thrown his back out and Mom was barking orders from the couch while I hauled down dusty boxes full of old tax returns and broken holiday decorations. That's when I found the folder, wedged behind an old suitcase, yellowed and soft at the edges. It had my grandfather's name on it in faded Sharpie. I didn't mean to snoop. I really didn't. But the second I opened it, I knew something wasn't right. Inside were bank statements, handwritten notes, and a copy of my grandfather's will. The will I'd seen once before, years ago, right after he passed. I remembered it clearly because, at the time, it was the only document I'd ever seen my mom get genuinely emotional about. Grandpa had divided everything 3 ways: Mom, Uncle Dan, and their youngest sibling, Aunt Melissa, who lives out of state. But what I found in the folder told a different story. It wasn't just a clean split. There were amendments. One specifically stated that Dan was to receive nothing if certain conditions weren't met. Grandpa had added it a year before he passed away, after Dan had borrowed a large sum of money from the family business and promised to pay it back within 6 months. According to a letter in the folder, written by Grandpa himself, Dan never paid a cent. So the amendment cut him out. Period. It was signed, notarized, legal. But when Grandpa passed, Dan did get money. A lot of it. In fact, according to the bank statements, he'd been wired his third within days of the estate settling. I'd stared at the documents for over an hour in that attic, trying to piece it all together. I didn't say anything to my parents. Not yet. I wasn't even sure they knew. But I took pictures of everything. Every page. Every note. And I waited. Now, if you're wondering why I kept that to myself for so long, the answer is simple. I didn't think it was my fight. I wasn't part of the will. I wasn't owed anything. It was old family business, and I figured if Mom or Melissa ever dug it up again, they could deal with it. But then they gave me that cake. The smug laughs. The condescension. The years of being their emotional punching bag brushed off as jokes or tough love. I realized something in that moment. They didn't just look down on me. They needed me to stay beneath them. As long as I was the disappointment, they didn't have to look at their own garbage. So I whispered those 5 words to Uncle Dan, walked out, and let the rot do its thing. When the phone calls started coming in, I ignored the first few. Then one night, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up when Mom called. "Alex," she said, breathless. "Why would you say something like that to Dan? What's going on?" I stayed quiet for a second, then said, "I didn't say anything untrue." "You're confused," she snapped. "You don't know what you're talking about. Dan has always been generous with this family." I laughed, actually laughed. "Sure. Generous with Grandpa's money, maybe." There was a pause, long enough to make me wonder if she was going to deny it. But instead, she said something I didn't expect. "You don't understand what that money meant to him." That told me everything. They knew. At least, she did. Maybe not all the details. Maybe she'd been told a half-truth, or maybe she helped cover it up. But her tone wasn't shocked, it was tired. Defensive. Like this was an old wound that had never healed properly. I hung up. A few days later, I got a call from Aunt Melissa. She never calls. Not for birthdays. Not for holidays. But now she was calling me at 10 at night, leaving a voicemail that started with, "I heard from Jenna that you said something at the birthday dinner. Is it true? Please call me." Jenna, bless her, must have told her everything. So I called Melissa back. Told her about the folder. The documents. The amendment. The payments. I even emailed her the photos I'd taken. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, I knew something didn't add up. When the estate was settled, Dan suddenly bought that lake house. But Mom told me it was part of Grandpa's gift. She said I wasn't supposed to question it. You know what she did next? She called a lawyer. That's when the real panic started. Because Dan didn't just bend the rules, he likely forged documents to override a legal will. If proven, it wouldn't just mean he had to pay the money back. It could mean fraud charges. And if anyone else had known and helped cover it up, well, let's just say people started losing sleep. I wasn't trying to burn the house down. But once the match was lit, I wasn't going to blow it out either. The messages from Ashley shifted from mocking to begging. You need to fix this. This has gone too far. Do you really want to tear this family apart? And then finally, you've always been jealous of him. Jealous. Right. Because nothing screams jealousy like being humiliated at your own birthday dinner and walking out with the last bit of dignity you've got left. At this point, Jenna texted me just one sentence. You might want to check Facebook. So I did. That's where I saw the post. A long, melodramatic screed from Uncle Dan, whining about entitled younger relatives who don't understand how business works and are trying to ruin good people's lives for attention. No names mentioned, of course. But the comments were a dumpster fire. Some distant relatives were backing him up. Others, mostly friends of Aunt Melissa and people who'd known Grandpa, were asking questions. That's when I knew the tide had turned. Because for the first time, it wasn't just me being painted as the black sheep. The story was cracking open. The roles were shifting. And they were finally afraid. And that was just the beginning. After Dan's vague Facebook post, the family group chat exploded. I hadn't checked it in months, muted it ages ago, but curiosity got the best of me. There were over 120 unread messages. Most were from Ashley and my mom, spinning the narrative hard. We've always tried to support Alex. This is all a misunderstanding. He's confused. We just want to protect Grandpa's legacy. Protect it? Please. They'd shredded his legacy the minute they let Dan cash a check that wasn't his. What stunned me, though, were the responses. My cousin Leah, Melissa's daughter, who'd always been quiet at family events, was furious. She posted screenshots of the amendment I'd sent to Melissa. This is clearly fraud, she wrote. If you're more mad at Alex for exposing it than at the person who did it, you're part of the problem. Jenna backed her up. So did Tyler, believe it or not. People were picking sides, and for once, mine wasn't the empty corner. But the real hammer came from Melissa. She posted one sentence. My lawyer will be in touch with all parties involved in the estate handling. Please save any documentation you have. That's when things got quiet. For about 2 days, the group chat went dark. Then I started getting phone calls again. This time from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them go to voicemail. Some were lawyers. Others were concerned family friends, telling me how hard this must be on my mother. One message said, "Do you really want her health to suffer over something this old?" Like I was supposed to feel guilty for someone else's ulcer when they'd spent years laughing at my expense. But the one call I did take was from Dad. Now, my dad's not a loud man. He's a go-with-the-flow type, which often meant go along with whatever your mother says. He's quiet at dinners, fixes things when they break, and stays out of drama. That night, he called while I was out walking. It was cold, and I remember watching my breath fog up in the air as I answered with a flat, "Hello." He didn't waste time. I didn't know, Alex. I swear. I stopped walking. Didn't know what. About the amendment. About what your grandfather changed. Your mother told me the will was split evenly. I never saw the documents. I just believed her. Why? He paused. Because I wanted to. There was a long silence. Not angry, just heavy. I'm sorry, he said finally. For the dinner. For the cake. I knew it was mean, but I didn't think it would hurt you that much. That's the problem, I said. No one ever thinks I have a right to be hurt. He didn't argue. Didn't defend anyone. He just said, "What do you want me to do?" It was the first time anyone had asked me that. I told him I didn't know yet. Meanwhile, Melissa's lawyer was moving fast. Within a week, they'd sent letters of inquiry to the attorney who had handled Grandpa's estate. Turns out, that lawyer had retired shortly after the estate was settled, but he still had records. And guess what wasn't in the final version of the will he processed? The amendment. That's right. The legal amendment Grandpa had signed wasn't submitted during probate, which meant either Dan had somehow intercepted it, or someone had deliberately chosen not to include it. Given that my mom was listed as the primary contact during the process, It didn't take a genius to see where this was going. And remember, I had the copy. Signed, notarized, time-stamped from months before Grandpa passed away. So now Melissa's lawyer was pushing for an investigation into probate fraud. If the court ruled in her favor, it could not only force Dan to pay back his entire inheritance, plus interest, but anyone who helped suppress that amendment could be held liable, too. The panic calls doubled. Ashley called in tears. "You're going to ruin everything," she sobbed. Mom's freaking out. She hasn't slept in days. She didn't seem too worried when she was laughing at the cake. "You're being cruel." "No, I'm being done." She hung up. That night, I got a knock on my apartment door. It was my mother. I stood there for a second, stunned. She looked tired. No makeup, jacket thrown over her shoulders, like she'd driven over in a rush. I stepped outside, arms folded. She didn't wait for me to speak. "I didn't know he changed the will." I raised an eyebrow. "I found it in the attic years ago," she admitted. "I didn't know what to do. Dan told me it wouldn't hold up in court. That Grandpa was confused in his final year." "He wasn't," I said flatly. She looked down. "I know that now. But at the time, it was easier to believe him. Easier than doing the right thing." She looked up. "I was trying to protect the family." I shook my head. "You were protecting Dan." She didn't deny it. I should have slammed the door. I should have walked back inside. But part of me still needed to understand. So I asked, "Why did you even invite me to that dinner?" Her eyes welled up, and for a second, I thought she might say something honest. But all she said was, "Because I thought it would be good for you. A reminder of what you have." That was the moment I realized we weren't speaking the same language. What I had was a family that only valued me when I played the role they wrote for me. When I sat quietly at the bottom of the ladder so they could look down and feel taller. Not anymore. I didn't let her in. I didn't hug her goodbye. I just said, "Tell your lawyer to call Melissa's." Then I shut the door. That weekend, Jenna invited me over for coffee. No drama, just coffee. She told me Melissa's lawyer had enough evidence to file. The process might take months, maybe even longer, but it was happening. And Dan, word was, he was already talking to someone about asset protection, trying to hide money. He'd lawyered up fast. But here's the thing about hiding money after you've committed fraud. The courts don't like it. And if they trace any part of that inheritance to others, say, joint accounts or gifts, they might go after them too. And guess whose names were on the wire transfer paperwork from Grandpa's estate? Yup, Dan and my mom. It took 8 months. 8 long, tedious, emotionally draining months of legal meetings, paperwork, depositions, and quiet behind-the-scenes panic among the "we just wanted what's best for the family" crowd. But justice, it turns out, doesn't care about fake smiles or family loyalty. It cares about receipts. And I had those in spades. Melissa's lawyer came through like a wrecking ball in his suit. The will amendment, my photos, the notarized documents, and even testimony from Grandpa's old lawyer, who confirmed that the amendment had been delivered before probate, painted a very clear picture. Someone removed that document before the will went through court. Dan and my mother were named as the 2 people with access to the estate paperwork during that exact time frame. There were emails between them discussing the inheritance, casually referencing splitting it 3 ways as agreed, even after the amendment was signed. The court didn't even need to look that deep to see the pattern: deliberate omission with financial motive. Classic textbook fraud. And then came the real kicker. Uncle Dan had not only taken his third of the inheritance, but he'd also quietly loaned my mom $30,000 from it a few weeks after the estate closed. Probably as a thank you for looking the other way. Melissa's legal team didn't miss that. Neither did the court. Dan tried to settle. Melissa refused. She wanted a full court judgment, something that would stick. And she got it. The ruling was brutal. Dan was ordered to repay his full share of the inheritance, plus interest, to Melissa, bringing the total close to $230,000. My mom was fined $15,000 for her part in the concealment and had to issue a formal statement acknowledging her role in the fraud. Dan also lost the lake house after a lien was placed on it, and it went up for sale within 2 months. The fallout? Glorious. Dan's reputation in the family tanked overnight. Half the cousins cut him off. The other half only showed up to ask awkward questions at family gatherings, then ghosted him when the truth sunk in. Mom spent the next few months trying to smooth things over with distant relatives, but no one really bought her redemption arc. She called it a mistaken judgment. Everyone else called it what it was: theft. Ashley tried to go radio silent at first, but eventually posted a cryptic Instagram story about snakes in the family. I didn't respond. She's irrelevant now. As for me, I moved on. I used the whole experience as fuel. Landed a job with a remote tech firm after months of searching. Better pay, better hours, and best of all, no one at work expects me to play the scapegoat. I got my own place in a quieter neighborhood, started therapy, and for the first time in a long while, I actually liked who I was becoming. Jenna and I stayed close. She's the kind of family that deserves the word. She stood by me when everyone else wanted me to roll over and smile through the humiliation. We laugh about it now, especially the cake. She even got me a new one this year. It said, "Oops. Turns out you were right." Melissa? She and I talk regularly. She told me once that if I hadn't spoken up, Dan would have gotten away with it forever. That Grandpa would have been disrespected by the very people who claimed to honor him. She thanked me for protecting his memory when no one else had the spine to. And my parents? I haven't spoken to my mother since the ruling. Not once. She sent a letter, handwritten, 3 pages long. I opened it, read the first line, then fed it to the shredder. I wasn't interested in, I did what I thought was best, anymore. That ship had sunk. My dad eventually reached out. Quietly. Respectfully. We had coffee. He apologized again, not just for the fraud, but for the years of being silent while I got torn down in the name of tough love. I told him I appreciated it. But I also told him this. If you want to be in my life, you do it by showing up, not by covering for other people's damage. So far, he's kept showing up. But most importantly, I'm no longer the disappointment. Not to myself. Not to the people who matter. And definitely not to the family that couldn't handle the truth.